Eternia has to deal with the Eater of Worlds. Here's your look at the Mattel Masters of the WWE Universe, The Fiend Bray Wyatt. WWE and Masters of the Universe combine into a powerful force, the Masters of the WWE Universe. Channel the power with this highly posable action figure, a WWE superstar, as a Masters of the Universe character. Before we get down to the review of the Masters of the WWE Universe Bray Wyatt, you know, of course, the first thing we're going to do, somebody's yelling in the back, conquer the world. I like the way you think. No, but before we get a closer look at Bray Wyatt, the first thing we're going to want to do, as we always do normally, is going to measure the figure. And by doing this, I'm going to take the tape measure right to the very top of his head. Even though I'm kind of describing it to you, I've already taken the time and done it. The figure of Bray Wyatt stands 5.9 inches in height. We can switch that over to centimeters, revealing that the figure is 15.1 centimeters tall. Seeing as we have made some progress with the Masters of the WWE figures, having already looked at two, why don't we bring in those two? Starting first, there's Mr. T. Kind of looks like he's about to fall over. We can also bring in Jake the Snake Roberts. Pardon my hairy arm while I was talking about that. They're all going to be roughly the same style of figure, utilizing the same similar molds. The only thing that really, of course, changes in instances like this is, of course, what's over top of the figure's body. Both Mr. T and Jake the Snake had torso pieces added over top of it. Bray Wyatt doesn't have that necessarily. What he has instead is a ripped sleeve leather jacket. We'll get a closer look at that in a second. First things first, let's have a look at the accessories that come included with Bray Wyatt. Pardon me, everybody. I'm being interrupted by a gentleman at the back of the crowd. Yes, sir? No, you don't actually have to be standing to ask your question. You can remain seated if you want to. Sorry, what? Oh, you're still seated. I'm being asked by a rather large gentleman at the back of the crowd that I could quite clearly see. He's asking, is this it for the way of his accessories? No, actually, he does come with a lot more, sir. We'll get into that in a second. Rather tall gentleman. First thing we're going to have a look at is the mini comic, and I'm not just saying it just only by its size, but the contents certainly are quite mini as well. It's literally one single sheet. It does also give you a read-up, and while you may think that there's a lot to read, it is actually only consisting of 4 words. Evil Lord of Fireflies, and all the rest of it is in a different language. Speaking of languages, there is nothing written here on the inside, though again, only one single sheet. But I'm guessing and deducing that Jake the Snake is in charge of handling stuff, or maybe he... Oh, wait a minute. Going back to Mr. T's comic, it's almost like I had this all planned. The inside of Mr. T's comic looked like he was forging something. Perhaps, if I'm looking at this correctly and seeing that Mr. T digs his gold, perhaps was he forging then the gold belt that Jake the Snake has? Maybe Jake the Snake stole this as he took away by something with talons, and he ended up taking it back to Snake Mountain. Then from there, I guess Bray ended up coming in, sneaking in, and stealing the things for himself. He's a bit of a thief, isn't he? Again, like, this comic is pretty skimp. At least it does still say the characters' names on the back, at least the 4 characters that make up this wave. Jake the Snake, already looked at that. Mr. T did that too. The Fiend, looking at it currently, Seth Rollins, dead last. We'll put that to the side. Now to the gentleman that was asking the question, a rather large sir that was at the back. You did ask if there were any other accessories, and there were. Right now, he's actually wearing them. If we pick the figure up, and that's not actually a riddle, you spin it around to the back. And I'm assuming this is where these are supposed to go. He comes with 2 gauntlet weapons. And they're not just attached by just mere wishing alone. They seem to be... And this is one of the reasons why I kept it on the jacket, because I really don't want to keep doing this, putting it back on, taking it back off. But there seems to be slots on the back of Bray Wyatt's jacket. Now, because there are no instructions, I put 2 and 2 together and just assumed that this was supposed to get slotted into this, because there's no other place where these actually can go. They're difficult, I will say, to put in place. But once you get them done the first couple of times, it seems to relax the plastic a little easier. Mind you, the axe here is still a little more difficult because you have to kind of tuck the jacket partly into just behind the blade and then hook it into place from there. You'll see, interestingly enough, that the axe says hurt, and this actually says heal. Very interesting, though. I don't know what healing he would be doing with a big giant mace arm like this, but we'll go ahead and remove this for the time being. If you have difficulty, by the way, trying to do this the first time, what you can also do, see, it's hard to get it around the axe head. There we let go, let go. There we go. All right. See, you don't want to do this too often. I mean, it's very difficult to kind of get that into that. What you could also do, too, is going back to the idea that you can mix and match these figures. If it does help at all, you can remove his lower half if it means it's a little easier to kind of get access to this. But again, like the axe of the two things is the harder to put in place because you're going to have to, yeah, tuck that in there. Snap the two halves of Bray back together. So with his gimmick, he actually has two different gimmicks. The first one involves the things that we just finished removing. Take the two gauntlet weapons, and what you do is just remove his hands. Just like that, and just like... Actually, you know what, I suppose before we do it, I just want to show you just regular black gloved hands. Why I'm drawing your attention to this is probably these aren't going to stay on for the majority of this review. Once these suckers come off, I'm probably going to leave them off for the rest of this review. So I hope nobody got too attached to those. Go ahead then and take the arms, take these weapon pieces, and they can just fit onto his arm like this. We'll do with one for now. I'm going to put the figure down, and I'm just going to abruptly leave it for the time being. And where are you going with this? Well, if I just reach off to the black hole, I'm going to bring in Trapjaw, because I'm sure somebody is probably asking the very same question that I asked when I opened up Bray Wyatt. Could you then take these pieces, because again, keeping in mind, when you look at them, they seem to have the same type of hook to them. So, well, one thing you can do with it is you can latch these onto the same hoops, little loops, that Trapjaw had. Just a little harder to kind of get in there. But, unfortunately, the way that the peg system works, these are more designed for Bray Wyatt's arm sockets, and the holes are a little bit smaller. So when you go ahead and say remove Trapjaws, just put them down for a second, and you can see the difference between the two. Unfortunately, they're not the exact same. Which means, ergo, you can't use the blaster rifle, the laser pistol, for example. You can't use it with Bray because the socket is way too large, right? It also means that when it comes to Trapjaw, you can't then take Bray Wyatt's accessories and fit them into place. There isn't the available means to do it. Just too small of a peg. That's a bit of a shame. But again, I can understand why they did it, because it's not supposed to attach to a different arm. It's supposed to attach to a regular master's arm. So we'll go ahead and attach this into place. There you go. And now you've got Bray Wyatt with two weapons on his hands. I don't know how he's supposed to hold a cup of coffee personally, but at least it's neat to look at, and it gives him something extra to, of course, when it comes to a gimmick. He does also have one other gimmick as well, and it involved a lot of prying on my part. The mouth does open and close, and it was really difficult to first do this. I ended up having to heat it with a hairdryer, and then even then pry it with a flat-headed screwdriver so I could get the mouth to open properly. Unfortunately, paint gets left off here. Advertised on the packaging, Bray Wyatt has a red tongue, and he actually has red around his lips as well. In both cases, that's completely gone, just all favoring black. I like the fact that at least you can open up the mouth, but I wish it was a lot easier to do it than what it ended up being. For the purpose of displaying the figure, I'd like to keep the mouth open personally, because it just adds a little bit of extra something to look at. Speaking of extra something to look at, you're probably seeing that little extra something to look at right now. Poor Bray Wyatt has had a wandering eye. No, he's not looking at other people in Eternia, but you'll see that his eye has wandered right off of his mask opening, the little area where his eyes normally would be. This eye isn't so bad, but this poor eye right here, somebody must have been painting or printing that eye on with their own eyes closed, because unfortunately it has left the area where it should have been and ended up on his mask. I think what I might try to do is find a color similar to his mask and then paint over that area just so that the eye is completely gone. Boy, that sucks. Of all the figures, and I ordered these figures online, so it would have been impossible for me to try to pick out the best-looking Bray. Ultimately, I guess the one that the guy had ended up just having that little imperfection on his eye, which, like I said, it's a bit of a shame. As for the detailing on the figure does look nice. He's got the blonde dreads there on the back of his head. It's not all quite the same blonde either. It almost has a slight bit of a greenish tint to it. Some of the strands are a different color than the strands that are around them, but it does break things up rather nicely, so it just doesn't look like somebody just slapped the same coat of paint across everything. I did mention that this one also does have the leather jacket, which I'm sure has been used for another Masters figure. I'm trying to think if like a Bret Hart had it, for example, or maybe Triple H himself may have actually had the same leather jacket. Though I don't think the slots on the bottom probably would have carried over. They may have just added that for Bray's. I guess technically, the way that they designed it, you could remove this jacket in its entirety. It doesn't look like it's necessarily attached to anything. In fact, popping the head off, that was timed perfectly. It doesn't look like this jacket is really attached to anything. So you probably could just take this off, just remove the arms, remove this completely. I will say, though, the jacket does add a little bit of extra, much-needed volume. Underneath all that, mind you, is a traditional Masters body, and all they've done is painted the tank top in. They haven't sculpted it, and nor would I really expect them to do that either. He has a couple of little straps there on the side. Sorry, that tall gentleman's saying something again. Yeah, I should probably put the head back into place. Let's make sure this time around I put it on securely enough that it's not going to fall off. Now, he does have these straps there on his arm. One thing that you'll probably see as well is with the plastic that they've used for the arm, they haven't painted it, but unfortunately it doesn't match the same color for this area right here. I'm not really sure why, other than maybe guessing that the torso piece here is actually all in black plastic, and they've inverted it. They've painted the flesh tone above. It sort of results in the two colors not quite being close enough to one another. Slightly more of a warmer flesh tone, I think, on the arms than at least on this torso piece here. Similar to his ring gear, he does have the stripes there on his legs. Kind of a pinkish red coloring that they've used. And paint, for the most part, as I'm looking at it here with my own eyes, seems pretty clean. For the rest of his body, it's the same body that was used for both the Jake the Snake and the Mr. T that we've already had a look at. Although this one doesn't have the knee pads, for example, that T had. That's Mr. T, by the way. But at least it still has the same ring gear boots and the same tights. Which I guess technically, I mean, as you're looking at it, it's just still a Masters of the Universe lower torso. So they really didn't have to change anything there at all. Looking at the posability now on Bray Wyatt, it's going to be a little bit more limited when it comes to his head. Sure, yeah, he still has the ball joint that all the traditional Masters figures will have, but due to the likelihood of his long hair just being the real culprit, it does limit then what you can do when it comes to rotating his head. It's soft plastic, but I don't think soft enough that it doesn't get hung up, of course, especially when you got the spikes there on the tops of his leather jack here, or leather vest, I suppose. The head does move up, down, and just a little bit, not too much, back and forth. It does have a waist swivel, so you can rotate it all the way around. For his arms, you can bring them out. The same articulation as, of course, all the other Masters figures. So what, about a 90-degree angle? Not bad at all. You can rotate the arms all the way around. He does have a bend in the elbow, which also serves to allow the forearm to rotate all the way around. The only thing that gets sacrificed, at least in this part of the review, is because I have already taken the liberty of removing his hands. The hands were the things that had the hinge joints. And because these don't have hinges, the only thing you can then pull off on the attachments is just being able to do this. If you want to spin the axe going sideways, or you spin it facing that way. Still, though, despite the fact he does lose a little bit of articulation, I'd be more inclined to display Bray Wyatt with these. Though again, having him hold anything would be completely impossible. As for the legs pull off almost in effective splits. You can bring the legs forward and back, fine and good. Bend at the lower leg. Lower leg also rotates back and forth. You can rotate then the boots. They're attached separately after all. And just straighten that up. You can also bring the feet back and forth this way, and you can ankle pivot them. Again, for the purpose of displaying this guy, I'm going to display him with the gauntlets in his hands. I'm going to call them gauntlets. I guess you could just call them wrist weapons. Wrist weapons doesn't sound as polished, personally, if you ask me. And then again, we can bring in some of the previously looked at Masters figures, Masters of the WWE Universe. I have to say it works better saying it with a toy line than having it forced on TV where somebody mentions the fans as being the WWE Universe. I find that always to be cringe. But they're a nice pair of figures. And it really, with the characters the way that they're designed anyways, it doesn't have to be the case that you have to be a WWE fan. I mean, I was a WWE fan, watched it religiously. I don't really watch it much anymore. But I think they're just neat designed characters. Not to mention, most people will know Jake the Snake Roberts. Many people will know Mr. T from what he did inside the ring and what he did outside the ring on shows like A-Team. People will probably be, of the three figures we've looked at so far, less familiar with the character of Bray Wyatt. But I think he makes up for it for the fact that he has a really spooky looking mask. A wandering eye, unfortunately, but still a spooky looking mask displayed on the figure. By the way, those weapons that attach to the end of Bray's arms, those, while not compatible with Trapjaw's weapons, because the pegs are a little bit different, they are in fact compatible with Roboto. So if you have Roboto in your collection now and would like to swap things out and have him go slightly a darker side, then instead of having with the gray weapons, you can just simply use the black weapons that came with Bray. Instead of gray, you can go with Bray. I just realized that would have rhymed. I like the idea of him coming with swappable arm attachments, even though they aren't something that can fit with Trapjaw, simply just by the way that the two figures are designed differently from one another. I like the idea that displaying him, while it doesn't make any sense that he could be capable of holding anything, the idea of having Bray with dueling weapons like this is a pretty neat looking touch. It's also fun the fact that you can't open and close his mouth, as you can probably see there on the back of the packaging. It's the first panel. See the finger that's pulling down on his mouth? You probably can also see that there's red outlining his lips and there's red on the interior of his mouth. Neither can be found anywhere on the figure itself. The little bit of red that's on his face makes up his iris, and it's part of his eye that's wandering off. Where is it going? It's packing and leaving for the day. Come back here, eye. You're appreciated here. At least the other eye appreciates you. I wish I didn't have that little paint defect. I guess it could really have been worse. That eye could have been right across to the other side of his face. At least it's in a small enough area. If anything, I could probably just paint over that section in white. No harm, no foul. You never would really even know about it, unless you've seen this review of him. Bray Wyatt, of course, I think fits well. Pretty good, I think, with the Masters of the Universe, Masters of the WWE Universe figures. I think he works up there with, say, the likes of Mr. T. I think both of the figures are probably, if I was to choose the two figures I think would work the best in this line, if you wanted to display them with the other Masters of the Universe Origins figures, I probably would say Mr. T and Bray Wyatt is number 1 and number 2. Jake the Snake is still good as well, and still, sadly for Seth Rollins, he's still bottom last. Speaking of Seth Rollins, yes, his review, being that he is bottom last, will be coming up shortly. In the meantime, if you've picked up any of the Masters of the WWE, having to insert sometimes WWE into the mix, I really hate when they call it the universe, the WWE universe, but at least it works and makes sense here. I wonder which came first, though, calling the audience the WWE universe or the Masters of the WWE universe figures. Somebody who has a lot more knowledge of the WWE universe could probably tell me down below. But I do like this one. I wish he had a little bit easier of a time of opening up his jaw, but at least he does open up his jaw and he's got some pretty cool arm weapons. But weigh in, members of the mob. Let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of Bray Wyatt. And of course, if you are a new member to this mob, just joining the team now, come on in. We have fresh, cold, brisk iced tea. At least what's left of it. They seem to drink a lot of it, it seems, during these premieres. But make sure, of course, you hit that subscribe button down below, turn the bell notification on, and that, yes, you're making sure you're coming back to this channel. Peepers always peeled, because there's definitely going to be a lot more videos coming your way. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.